Today's episode is sponsored by Little Bird, the independent diamond and engagement ring consultants. The best way to buy an engagement ring is with a bird's eye view. You can find them at littlebirdtoldyou.com. I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
To know that it's worth wrapping yourself up entirely with someone, even if it means losing them.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. Our episode today is about loss and renewal. Now, we've all felt lost to one degree or another, and we've all heard about the stages of recovery. But the actuality of loss, and specifically the death of a loved one, is something far deeper and far more visceral than any explanation can ever quite capture. Our guest today, Erin Moon, was widowed after 10 years of marriage when she was 35. Her romance with her husband was an epic one, as you'll hear, and the death was a painful one, as she'll tell us. But as she says, the impact of a sudden death outweighs all of that, and you never really move on. But Erin has found renewal in her loss. Her story is an inspiring one, and it reminds me how, in some sense, it's really death that gives each of us our lives. So with that, let's go to our interview with Erin Moon. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, Erin. I really appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this call. And this is a call. I never do interviews that aren't in person.
Yeah. I wish I could be there. I love San Francisco.
Yeah, that's right. You have friends here and you know the city well.
Yeah. I really dig that town.
Yeah. So, all right. Now, the reason that we're having kind of a unique interview here is that, usually I interview couples.
Right.
And what makes you unique to the show, not unique in the world, unfortunately, is that you've lost your husband.
Yes, I have.
And I don't mean to divorce. I mean that he passed away at some point.
Yes, for just over 4.5 years ago now.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, usually I like to ask people how they met. So can you give us a little synopsis of how you two met and how your relationship unfolded before we start talking about
you bet. Yeah, I will.
Next phase?
So I went down to do Colorado Shakespeare Festival in Boulder. And we actually when you get down there, at least it used to be this way, you had to audition at the same time as the other actors. And they kind of had an idea of where they were going to place people, but it gave everybody a kind of an equal shot at getting something that they wanted. And we actually got called back together for Rosalind in Orlando. And it was this great scene where she's kind of teaching him how to court a woman, and the whole room just disappeared, completely gone, and it was only him and me, and he was making these really beautiful offers, and I remember leaving that audition, and I said to my friend who was there at the time, I was like, oh, I want to act with him. That was great. That was awesome. And because I totally thought it was just really good acting.
Wow.
And I actually had a teacher who, she was the voice and text coach down there, and she saw it happen, and she thought, oh, wow, I'm seeing this scene for the first time ever because it's two people actually falling in love in front of me. And at the time, I did not think that. I was not that hopeless or romantic. And by the end of the week, we ended up getting together, and we fell in love that whole summer, and then we were kind of faced with the problem of the fact that I'm Canadian and he's American.
Whoa, well you skipped to that really fast. Okay, but wait a minute. So you just skipped straight to, nationality, and which implicates marriage, from having fallen in love on stage.
Yeah. So what happened is we didn't get those parts.
What? I mean, that sounds magical. How could you not get those parts?
Because that's the way that the world of theater works.
Oh, that is exactly the way it works.
We got cast in actually there's 4 shows, and we got cast in separate casts. So he was doing 2 shows, and I was doing the other 2 shows. And at the end of the week, the first week, they always have this party called the Shakespeare's Men Party. And to go to the party, you have to do one of 3 things. Either buy as much alcohol as you can for under $4.
That's fair.
Of course. And or dress like a tart, whatever your interpretation of that is. Or
lots of pastries, I would guess.
Well, see, that's where I went the first year. The other girls didn't go so much to the tart level in that way. And then the third is to make a sculpture out of Spam. So because it was my second year and I realized that it was a way to get everybody really drunk and the women dressed up in very little clothing, I made a Spam sculpture the second year. But all the boys that year dressed it up like tarts. So Stafford went...
Oh, wait. Everybody had to do this.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm so
to
glad.
come to the party, you had to do one of those 3 things.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
okay.
Fantastic. So fun. And so that year, all the boys decided to dress like tarts, and they went to the secondhand store, and they all got like slips. And I ended up doing Stafford's nails and hair, and we were still just kind of like hanging out a little bit and stuff like that. And by the end of the night, I remember the name of his tart was Miss Pilla. And she was a Southern tart. And and he had a lot of fun with it. And we ended up playing Cat's Cradle till like 3 o'clock in the morning with, that child's game with a piece of string? Only we did it with Orlando, like the beads that you throw at Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
Which was great. It was the hottest Cat's Cradle I've ever played in my life.
That sounds great. And so, wait, now this was still just a couple of, days or weeks?
Oh, yeah, this is like day 5.
Wow.
And then the next day I got home that night and I left some bobby pins at his house that had like little things on them in hopes that he'd bring them to me the next day. That's about as manipulative as I ever get.
Is that's a standard practice, right? That's a kind of a...
Like, I think the good girls leave bobby pins.
Bobby, right. Okay. I see where you're going.
Yeah. And then, I had borrowed a shirt of his because my dress was cutting into me. And he came by my place the next day and I hid behind the door because I had that shirt on still. And I was so embarrassed that he would see that I slept in that shirt because I wanted to, because he was so great.
I mean, of course, it probably would have turned him on.
Well, he saw it. He kind of caught a glimpse of it behind the door when I slammed the door in his face to go get ready because he had come over to ask me if I wanted to go out that day.
Right.
And by the end of that day, through a kind of hysterical miscommunication we were both pretty tired and hungover, and he said, well, at this point we should probably, go get more coffee, go have a nap, or go for a walk or something. And I thought he meant go for a nap together. That is not what he meant. He is also a good boy. And we were young kids, although not that young. We were in our 20s. And so I didn't say a word. I beelined downstairs to the bedrooms of the dorms we were put in and lay on my bed facing the wall because I wasn't even sure if he was coming with me, if he was going to lie in bed with me. I was such a nervous wreck.
Miscommunications are so adorable.
Oh, my God. So great. And he too was like, what just happened? So he followed me downstairs and then he got into the room and he saw me smushed against the wall. And he was like...
With obvious space for him.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like, do I lie on the floor? Do I get in bed with her? I have no idea. And so he chose to get in bed with me. And we very innocently had a nap together where I'll never forget because we just looked at each other and looked at each other and looked at each other. And I could feel our hearts link up.
Yeah.
And we did have a little bit of a nap, but it was like the most, beautiful, epic nap I've ever had in my life. And
Active
and
napping.
that's how we started dating that summer.
That's a lovely story.
Yeah.
Well, okay, and then how did it go from there to marriage?
So then we had this little border in our way, and we were both, we'd been in relationships before. We weren't, completely pie-eyed after 3 months we're going to get married and go for it. But we were really in love, and we knew that we wanted to it wasn't supposed to be just a summer fling. And we went to the Denver Immigration Center and asked what our options were. And the woman said, you have to be a doctor, invest $1 million in the American economy, or be a superstar. And I was like, no, no, and no.
I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration.
It is and it isn't. It's kind of like somewhere in there, all of them are kind of your only options for being a Canadian. And because I figure they're like, yeah, you're good. You got your own country. Things are good there. You don't need to come here.
Right.
Or be sponsored by a company. And that wasn't really an option for me. And so finally he called up immigration one day and he referred to me as his fiance, to which I was like, and kind of freaked out at the same time. And the woman said, well, why don't you just get a fiancé visa? And it basically buys you 3 months in which to get married. And it takes about 4 months to actually go through. So it bought us time. And so we bought the time. And we walked across the quad after that conversation. And we were like, so are we engaged?
Wow.
Do we tell people? Do we get rings?
So how far in was that at that point?
3 months.
3
Not
months
even.
in. And you bought yourself 7 months, basically.
Yeah, we did. And it actually took a little bit longer than that. We went to Ireland and backpacked and hitchhiked around Ireland for a while, and then went back to Arizona where he was from, and he did a show. And then on February 14th, so epically romantic, in 2002, we got the fiancé visa, and we had to get married within 3 months, and we did.
Wow. And was it a real marriage?
Oh, no, it was a handshake marriage. I mean, it was a real marriage because we were in love with each other and we wanted to give ourselves the best shot. But we had a conversation of, like, we'll probably do this in 3 years. But we've known each other less than a year, and, maybe, like, we both kind of framed it that way. But at the same time, I wore, something... what is it? Something borrowed and something blue. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue.
Right.
And we got married at City Hall in New York City. And his dad insisted that he came because Stafford was the youngest of 6 kids, and his dad was edging up to 70. And my parents actually booked a ticket without telling me, then asked if they could come.
That's pretty cute. They were taking it more seriously than you guys almost.
Yeah, they were. And what's funny, and the reason why I even mentioned the kind of moment of the callback is that we did fall in love at first sight. And I think we didn't know it, but we did. We didn't logically know it till years later. Like, even at that point, we still didn't see that was the moment where it started. And it was only with that hindsight that we could see that we actually did fall in love at first sight in some funky way. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was great. We struggled like any married couple struggles, especially in the first 3 years.
Sure.
And then it took off. And at year 7.5, he actually threw me a surprise wedding, which was really cool.
Gosh, it is really a romantic story, but of course you're telling it in retrospect. And I wonder, so 2 things that come up for me is, what is a handshake marriage anyway, really? And then also what happened in those 3 years. But but tell me about the handshake marriage. I mean, I get the idea, but can you break it out a little?
Yeah, you know what it was? It was us vying for the fact that we were pretty sure this was what we thought it was, but we weren't ready yet. Like, we weren't ready to completely back the fairy tale and the reality of our lives. And we were trying, we at that point had, like I said, we were in our mid-20s, so we weren't total babies, but we weren't adults yet.
Right.
And we'd had long relationships, him in particular, me less so because I was a super late bloomer. But it just was us saying, I love you, you love me, we want to be together, and this is the way that this is what we have to do to be together. And, I think marriages are based on a lot less than that. So in our kind of way of thinking or framing it, it was a handshake marriage on that day, but it wasn't. It was just a really great gamble, which I think if you're going to jump, that's exactly what a good relationship does, is it has that moment of jump.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It's got that leap of faith.
Yeah, you just got to go for it. Yeah. And I freaked out like that after the 3 months. I had about 2 months where I freaked out. So a lot of people will freak out around the 3-year mark in a marriage or a relationship. I think irregardless, what I've noticed is that there seems to be a shit or get off the pot time around 3 years.
Yep.
And although, and we did, he had it then, but I had it really early because I was like, who is this? What is this? Oh my God, I'm going to change my whole life, my country, my everything for this guy and this love. But I just also knew that I couldn't make the decision not to do it. I had to, the one thing I couldn't do was stop it. I had to stay on the bus. I'm glad I did.
Today's episode is sponsored by Little Bird, the independent diamond and engagement ring experts. If you're getting married, the truth is that your engagement ring is likely to be one of the more expensive purchases that you ever make. And it's a tough one to make. How do you choose? Where do you go for reliable information about diamonds? Do you even want a diamond? And how do you keep from getting ripped off? Now, you can probably get up to speed on all of these issues by yourself because there is an immense amount of information on the internet. But that takes time, and time is valuable. And that's where Little Bird comes in. I vetted Danielle, the owner, myself, and I can tell you that not only is she good people, she really knows her stuff. Little Bird takes you through a process that helps you to find a ring that matches your personality and has lasting impact. They charge a flat fee for their services, and the odds are you're going to save more on the ring by working with them than they charge in the first place. So give Little Bird a call for a free consult. There's no harm, and you're going to learn a ton. And you can find their website at littlebirdtoldyou.com. And remember, the best way to buy an engagement ring is with a bird's eye view.
Well, if that's so, then why doesn't everybody just do that?
I don't know. I've been really fascinated by, because I got married young and now I'm widowed young and now I'm back in the bizarre world of dating, which I've never really done. I'm really fascinated by how many people are reticent to jump, to just kind of, because the worst thing that can happen is your heart can get broken. And
money.
I mean, yeah, all of those, those definitely. We didn't have any of that, so it was we were okay there.
That does make it easier in some ways,
Yeah, it does help when we got back from Ireland and we had $70 between the two of us, and to open 2 separate bank accounts, we each needed to have $50.
That's great.
So we only ever had one bank account. It was only ever we never had much. We were artists living in New York City, so we had very little, and it does help. But yeah, I don't know. And I think you kind of have to keep doing that in a relationship too. You have to keep being at a place to be willing to jump, really.
Or else
you're not, you're going to lose that. I don't know how to describe it. Or else you lose that vulnerability and openness that it takes to be at the place of jump. that heart and life laid bare, to choose this person above all others, to be the one you go to, you talk to, you make love to, you cuddle with, you make the plans and pictures of your life with. And I think you really do have to be, when it works best, I think you got to be really laid bare for it.
Yeah, I totally get that. And then I wonder, so now when you're dating, are you doing, I mean, I guess there's probably a way to lay yourself bare to a dating relationship that doesn't necessarily mean signing a marriage contract with everybody you're going to date with.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll let you know because I'm open to dating, but apparently it's this whole other world now.
Oh, it's a whole new universe. It so is.
So I don't know, and I haven't like had a boyfriend yet. I'm finally at the point where I'm ready, and I'm actively open to it, and I'm trying to do the online thing or understand how to make that online thing work for me.
Yeah.
But I haven't dated someone since I started dating him when I was 24.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good point for us to then back up.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened? So he passed away. Something happened.
Mm-hmm.
What was that about?
So we were married for 10 years, together for 11, and he got sick with cancer. It's a cancer called osteosarcoma, and he struggled for a year and a half, fought really hard, and went through a ton of surgeries and a lot of chemo because it's a child's cancer, and kids get more chemo than adults because their cells regenerate faster so they can bounce back faster. And so he was getting pediatric doses of chemotherapy. And
that was appropriate?
Yeah, that was appropriate. It's basically it's a shitty catchphrase, but it's kill the cancer without killing the patient.
Right.
And so because it's your own cells, that's the thing. People talk about cancer like it's this thing you catch, and that there's some way that you can kind of codify different types of cancer or otherwise, and you kind of can categorize it and otherwise, but truthfully, it's your body, your cells, and your cancer. It's not an outside thing, it's an inside thing.
Sure.
And I was by his side the entire time. I literally didn't leave him, and then he passed in 2011, I guess it would be now, or 10. It's hard because it doesn't matter about dates so much. But in early December, and 4.5 years ago, or almost 5 years ago now. So yeah, 2010, I guess. And then it's been a long road of all of the different things that come with grief, and especially being a woman who's in her mid-30s, I was then, who is a widow, because in the Western world, there's not a lot of us.
Yeah, and it's reserved for elderly women.
Yes, and so
in our culture. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's really like grief is extremely isolating, and then grief as a widow who's been married for 10 years as a 35-year-old is even more isolating.
Right.
In the West, again, with everything with the over in the Western world.
Well, before we can talk about that, can we talk about what it was like to sit with the love of your life as he passed away?
Yeah, a little. We didn't know that he was terminal until about 4 days before he passed. We knew that the chances of him living for a long time went down because basically he'd been cleared of the osteosarcoma. So you kind of get cleared where you get scans, and there's no detectable cancer is what they say. And then in 3 months you get another scan. And so he had about 3 months. He was taking a kind of preventative drug, but other than that, no chemo, no nothing. And he actually even went to Boston and did a show and this is on one leg that had a complete interior prosthesis in the upper part of the leg. So he had to learn how to walk again and everything.
Wow.
But he did the show. And he got back from the show, and he'd had his 3-month scans the week before, and it had come back in. It's a bone cancer. Starts in the legs. It eventually goes to the lungs because the lungs filtrate the body, and it had come back in his lungs worse than it had been. He went through, got more surgery, and then they were going to put us on some trials that were really promising. And he started to act a little odd and off, and he got a really bad headache. And we went in to emerge, and it was in his brain. It had somehow got past the blood-brain barrier because you have a barrier to help prevent things like the flu coming to your brain. Like your body's set up to protect its computer center. So
right.
But he had brain surgery, and he survived that. And then we had so at that point we knew it was pretty pervasive, and it had started to spread at a level that it had never done before. So we knew that our time was limited, but we didn't know to what end. Like we thought years and years still. And then he was acting odd again, and outside of the oddness that comes from being on steroids, from trying to shrink swelling and all that kind of stuff. And my sister actually, because I was the only breadwinner, so I was doing audiobooks at the time. I still do, but that's what I was doing that day. My sister brought him in, and I showed up, and it had gone to his heart. And even when he first got there, he had pneumonia from the backup of fluids, so they fixed that. And then they looked and saw that it was in his heart, and it was that Sunday when he started to recover from the pneumonia that he was actually doing a bit better, that we were told that they couldn't do heart surgery. So at that point he was terminal. And we still thought that he could have up to even a month. So we were making plans to jump out of the hospital as soon as we could, even if he had to be on oxygen, because he was at the time, and go on one last Erin and Stafford adventure, like get in a car and drive south and head towards New Orleans. And very quickly over the next few days, his oxygenation deteriorated. And that Thursday was when he passed, but he only became unconscious the Thursday morning before he passed. So we had some time even. That's really early, the Thursday before he passed away.
I want to know, what do you say to your partner when you realize that it's terminal, whether it's imminent in the next couple hours or months? I mean, what do you say, and what does he say back?
Well, I think for him, it was really hard for him, and what he did throughout, but particularly that few days, was he wanted to make sure that I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, all he cared about was that I was going to be okay. And even before we were told that that was all, that there was nothing else that could be done, he just kept saying to the doctors, as soon as it came back, when it was in his heart and when it came to his brain, he was just like, you do whatever you can do to make me be here for as long as I can with this woman. And he would always say that. And he made me make a lot of promises to him, because he had a very small window to do that. We started to take more pictures and videos and stuff, but even then I kept saying to him, I don't want you to spend all the time you might have left with me saying goodbye.
Right.
And in retrospect, I was kind of mad at myself for a while for saying that, because I wish I had more, because he would have done a lot more. Right. But in retrospect on that, I know that that's good and bad, to have more, because it's what it becomes something that I can bury myself inside of, and I used to definitely bury myself inside of more than now, because I see that it's not what he wants, and it's not what he inevitably asked of me, which was to live, love, and laugh, and to keep my heart open to love, and to basically, the first thing he said was I wasn't allowed to kill myself. Because I think I would have. Because he was everything to me. My family, my lover, my confidant, my one. And so I promised. And on my end, I mean, I told him I loved him. I didn't leave his side for a second from the second we got in ICU till when he passed, which was 1 week. And in, I just did everything I could to make him feel loved and comfortable, and he already knew all those things. It's a funny thing when you're so solid in your love like we were. I didn't have to reassure him or reiterate to him all the time that he, even though this thing was happening, there was nothing else that I needed to say, because I'd already said everything. Right. I said it all the time. And I told him I loved him all the time. But it's kind of like there was one point where he started to hyperventilate because he was having trouble with oxygen. And I got him to calm down and slowly get back on top of his breath. And he was like, that was really scary. You got to say whatever you need to say. And again, that was about me, not him.
Right.
Say whatever you need to say in case something like this happens. And I go. And I said, I've already said everything I need to say. And that's true, because I did all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like actually he was the one who had something that he needed to say. He needed to tell you to keep loving and living.
Yeah. Yeah. And to make sure that I was okay, and it really did set me up for surviving his death in so many ways. And, I've kind of, a lot of even what I do now, I'll have moments where I think like how proud he would be of me, and it helps me. And that's all him. That was what his main impetus was that I knew, or that he would know that I would be okay. Because he felt like he was ruining my life, and I told him, you're not ruining anything. You didn't do this. This just happened.
Oh, man. That he would think, that breaks my heart.
Yeah, it broke mine. Yeah, it really broke mine. I was like, no. You're not doing anything to me. You are not hurting me. This situation is hurting me. But you are not doing anything wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a great man.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, the way he handled his death is so so graceful.
Yeah. Yeah. He was, only concerned about everyone else. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And then it was time to move on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a term that people use a lot, as the term "move on," and you don't really. You just get used to being in a world with your loss and grief,
right?
And from the perspective that you now know life. So the only thing I moved on from was my own perception of life, because that no longer existed. But like, I'll always love and miss Stafford, and I'll always miss him. I'm just used to it now.
Wait. The only thing you moved on from is your own...
My old perspective of life. Like, right. My old Erin died when Stafford died. And then I had to get to know who I am and this world and how to love him and how to be in this world without him, but also with him. Because he's a part of me. Like, I mean, my sense of humor, the way I hear things, the way I see things, the dreams and aspirations I've had in life, the life that I've built is so fundamentally, because my entire adult maturation was with him in New York City. And so that does have its kind of through line, and always will. The thing that I had to let go of or move on from was my own self and who I was before losing him.
Right.
Because I feel like that's fundamentally changed.
You know, it strikes me, too, that we're also scared to love. We're so terrified of what could go wrong.
Yeah.
And we don't think of it in terms of death usually. We think of it in terms of being broken up with or rejected or
the rejection.
Something along those lines. But it amounts to the same. It amounts to loss. You know, the degree is different and the flavor is different, but it amounts to loss. And that loss triggers some kind of a really deep fear.
I know. I think so many people are suffering from grief of different sorts and don't recognize it or give it its space and its time and to, you know, that it's actually more normal. Like, it needs to be a normalized thing. That grieving happens all the time. You're right. Divorces, you grieve. On top of it, you have rejection, you know, but you grieve that. You grieve that life you thought you were going to have. You grieve the expectations you thought you were going to have. And you do carry it forward with you, as opposed to moving on from, like, the way, you know, you bring things with you. It's just what and how they feed you, or what and how they exist and how you've gotten used to it. Like, how do you get used to your heartbreak? And everybody deals with that differently. Mine is of a certain type. But I think that people grieve jobs.
Right. Well,
they grieve cities. They grieve the way things used to be to the way they are now.
The breaking up of a friendship, the changing of a group. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a piece that I can only imagine you have some insight about, conscious or unconscious, around engaging again. Because, as you say, there's this grief everywhere, but there's potential grief everywhere and potential loss everywhere. And again, to different degrees. And and specifically when we enter into romantic relationships, what you just went through is implicated in every new relationship.
Yeah.
As is a breakup.
And absolutely.
And yet, and that's what gives it its, that's half of the equation, right? I don't want to be cliche and say it's the loss that gives us the sweetness of life, but it kind of is. Or to a degree it is. And you're more in touch. It seems to me like you must be more in touch with that than you were before, or than many of us are.
You know, I think that there's still choice involved. I think that some people can see that that's the possibility of life and cloister themselves up and, self-create solitude from that knowledge. But I know now, I'd lost people before, but they were older. I'd lost a couple of friends who, freak accident, committed suicide, and those were, friends. But this person who had every part of me wrapped up in them, to know that it's worth wrapping yourself up entirely with someone, even if it means losing them. Because I also just am palpably aware that, we all say, that you could cross the street tomorrow and be hit by a truck. Right. We say those kind of things throughout our lives as these little kind of colloquialisms, but we don't. In the Western world, we are very protected. Not everybody, by far, and people have suffered a lot greater pain, trauma, and loss than I have. but that there's no point for a second to not live fully and love fully, because whatever is going to happen is whatever is going to happen. And any thought or idea that you think you have about having control is a fallacy. And I know it sounds negative, but I actually think it's freeing. And I think it takes some of the pressure off. And I think that it makes me want to make a positive impact and live a positive life in every possible way that I can, in hopes of lifting others for as long as we all have into kind of the best possible experience of consciousness or living that we can have. But and I think Stafford and I were both kind of heading in that direction at the time anyway. We were just kind of brushing toward a greater scope of live life to its fullest, and we always kind of did. But now I know the level of pain that life can dish, and I still think go for it, like, all the time. And maybe that's something that, I mean, grief can shut people down, but I think you're right. It can also open people up and kind of get rid of some of the parameters that they've put on their lives.
And then, yeah, I really resonate with what you're saying around acknowledging that we don't have the control that we pretend to. And for me, I think of it in terms of surrender.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I articulate that to people, sometimes they get it right off. Sometimes they think of it as having given up. And they think maybe he's just given up. Things were too hard. In my experience, it's not about giving up. There's this piece on the other end.
Yeah.
And
well, it's funny, like we say surrender into, we don't say surrender from. Like when you use surrender in that way, you think, I'm going to surrender into whatever's going to happen. I'm going to surrender. And there's always this idea of, to me, it's like you don't surrender from something, like away from, you surrender into limitless possibility. Like surrendering is innately that. So I agree with you. I think that you surrender, you really do. And it does seem like it's a negative that you're backing away from, but actually if you look at how you would use it as an idea or a sentence even, it's not a backing away. It's an opening.
It's an allowing.
Yeah, 100%, I think.
Beautiful. So now we're full circle to where we started, or where we were discussing your impending dating.
I like that it's impending.
It's the impending. That's where we're ending our episode with Erin Moon, folks. Thanks for listening. Now, we did go on to talk about Erin's dating life, and we're going to put that clip on our Patreon page for subscribers to hear. And maybe we'll catch back up with Erin in a few months to see how her dating life is going. If you'd like to learn more about Erin, you can find her website at moonyogatherapeutics.com. And if you liked what you heard on our show, please subscribe to us on iTunes. It makes a huge difference when you do that. I can't even tell you how important it is for subscribers to actually click that subscribe button, really on any of the podcatchers that you use. It boosts our ratings, and that, of course, is how other people hear about the show. So I appreciate it, and thanks for doing it. And if you do want to hear deleted scenes from any of our shows, please do check out our Patreon campaign. It's at patreon.com/together, and that's where we have a community of listeners who can listen to deleted clips like the one that we had from our show today. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out to us via one of our platforms. We love hearing from people. Our website is www.together.guide, and that's where you can find our magazine articles and essays. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both @together_show, or you can always email me at host@together.guide. And I love to hear from folks, so don't be shy. Well, that's it for today, everybody. See you on Monday. Bye for now.